Welcome everybody to FanStream Sports, powered by DSP Media. This is the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz, and I'm your host, Rob Fedoff, also known as RPT. You can find me on X at PFedoff. This is episode 137, but first things first, head over to our website at fanstreamsports.com for all additional podcast information. If you have an Apple device or an Android device, please feel free to download the FanStream Sports app. Please feel free to share that with your friends and family. The subject matter today, Monty Williams. Some of you are thinking, who's Monty Williams? Let's give you some basic Monty Williams 101 facts right now. He's a former Notre Dame basketball player. Back in the day, about over 30 years ago, he played from 1989 to 1994. So he was on the latter part of Coach Digger Phelps' career and then into the John McLeod era. He played 5 years because he had to sit out a year and a half. He had a heart condition that they had to see what the issue was. He was medically cleared, fine to play, and he had a hell of a career at Notre Dame. He's one of my top 10 all-time favorite players, and I've heard he's just a great overall nice guy, class act. No one has said a bad word about Monty Williams ever. He was a first-round pick of the New York Knicks back in 1994. His NBA career was more or less, I would say, a role player, anything spectacular, but more or less he's been in the coaching realm in the NBA since. I believe he retired in 2003, coached the New Orleans Hornets, who are now the New Orleans Pelicans. Then he coached the Phoenix Suns, led them to the NBA Finals in 2021. They were up 2-0 against Milwaukee that year. However, Milwaukee came back to win 4-2. Ironically, another Notre Dame connection. Milwaukee had Pat Connaughton, a solid player for Notre Dame. He's had a pretty decent NBA career himself. And there was that Notre Dame connection for the 2021 finals. Phoenix had a pretty good year the next year. However, they were upset in the playoffs. And then last year, solid season, another early round exit in the NBA playoffs. And with the way the league is right now, with ownership, you have to win right now. There's not much patience. And despite just a rough patch in the playoffs, they didn't seem to me, I would have just retooled instead of just cleaning house. And that seems what Phoenix did with their coaching staff. However, after Monty was fired by the Suns last year, the Detroit Pistons, who have been a mess pretty much the last 5 years, a very young team, I think there's probably older teams in the NCAA basketball college right now. I know even Notre Dame, Coach Bray's last year when he had a lot of fifth-year seniors, that team, the average age was higher than various NBA teams because with a lot of the one-and-done kids that come out when they're 19, 20 years old, if not younger. So he's dealing with a lot of young kids, and he was fired this week. So you're thinking that it really sucks for Monty Williams just after 1 year. However, I'm going to give you 65 million reasons why that's not the case in dollars. $65 million, that is. So let's just get into some of the basics about how this all went down earlier this week. So just a news release statement here. The Detroit Pistons have fired head coach Monty Williams, former Notre Dame player and graduate, just after a year after signing a $78.5 million contract. However, all that is guaranteed. So if you knock off this year's salary, as I said earlier, he is owed $65 million right now to collect for not even coaching anymore for the Detroit Pistons. The deal had 5 years left and was the largest for a coach in NBA history at the time. The team absorbing the over $65 million remaining on Williams' contract per multiple outlets. And then here, if you look, Detroit had the league's worst record this past season. Again, it's a very young team, and it's not like he's inheriting a very veteran staff. He's more or less coaching college kids, if not kids a couple years out of high school. So that's a little bit more difficult right there. It's not like Phil Jackson, even though he's a great coach too. But when he had those Bulls team and Lakers team, very veteran groups that he had to coach and just kind of fine tune things for that team to have much success. But they were 14-68 last year. The Pistons narrowly avoided moving into the sole possession of the longest losing streak in NBA history after putting an end to the 28-game losing streak they had that lasted up until December. They're in the NBA lottery again. And then here, just some more info on Monty Williams. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but here's the actual specific details. Monty Williams has previously been a head coach for the Phoenix Suns. His record was 194 and 115, so pretty solid in just 4 seasons. Led them to the 2021 NBA Finals, where they, like I said, they were up 2-0, but then lost the last 4 games. So he was 2 games with becoming a NBA Finals winning coach, which would have been a great accomplishment to add to that resume. He was the coach of the year for the 2021-22 season. And then he was fired in last May because they didn't make the playoffs. Because like I said, they were an early X in the playoffs. I misspoke there. And as I said earlier with the NBA is kind of weird the way it is. You have to win now. You can have just one little bad year, and then they pretty much just clean house. I kind of think about this. If you have one bad year of marriage, are you going to get a divorce? Some people do that, and then they get into another bad marriage, and then one bad year, they call it quits, and then another bad marriage. Instead of just, okay, you had a bad year, try to work things out. Maybe just some bad luck during that year. My parents, this week was their 60th wedding anniversary, so I'm sure they've had bad years here, but they didn't get divorced. I think the NBA should take that approach too, not just the NBA, but all sports. The Browns are famous for this. They fire coaches within less of a year after hiring them. Butch Davis had a couple solid seasons with the Browns, and then one bad year, maybe it was injuries, who knows, and then they fired him. Had they stuck with him, who knows, maybe the Browns would have had some good teams. That was like 15, 20 years ago. I'm just saying, I think it's too much reactionary in the NBA and other professional sports, but not to get on that soapbox. But just some more about Monty Williams, because I don't think a lot of people really remember him much at Notre Dame, because that was the end of Coach Phelps' career, the John McLeod years. John McLeod, like I said, class act too, but not the greatest coach. Those are some really lean years for Notre Dame. The best they would ever do was the NIT. I think it was mostly losing seasons, and then maybe he had 2. I know he had an NIT in 97 and maybe in 96, but that was it. But if you want to look at Monty's last year, so right here, he was 6'8", small forward from the University of Notre Dame. He was an honorable mention All-American his senior season, and these are pretty good numbers: 22.4 points per game, 8.4 rebounds during his senior season, and then he was the a first-round pick for the New York Knicks in 1994, the 24th overall pick. He has had some tragedy in his life. Like I said, I haven't heard a bad word about him, but he's had some bad shit that's happened to him the last couple years. On February 10th, 2016, his first wife, Ingrid, she died in a car accident, and they had 5 kids together. So he was a single dad with 5 kids after his wife died. And then he ended up getting remarried in 2017. And his current wife now, and I think she's doing better right now, but she was diagnosed with breast cancer last year. So just a lot of bad luck with him. And I know this seems like kind of some bad news this week, but it may be a blessing in disguise for him, because not just the money. I mean, that's the big one right there. He's owed $65 million. So he can kind of take his time to do what he wants to do. I know the Lakers had a head coaching position open this week. Dan Hurley turned them down from Connecticut. I think that's a good move for Dan Hurley. Stay at Connecticut, maybe take an NBA job on the East Coast if that opens up in the next couple of years, because he's an East Coast guy. But they hired JJ Redick this week, who's never coached an NBA game in his life. Again, to me, that does not make sense at all. But as I said earlier, some of these sports franchises, their management do not make sense with the decisions they make, but we'll see what happens there. I know the Cavs have a head coaching position open right now, and that's a solid young team right now, depending if Donovan Mitchell comes back next year. But it's still a solid nucleus, even if he doesn't come back. But I would just take a year off. But here's the thing where I see an opportunity for the Notre Dame men's basketball team currently with Coach Shrewsbury. I know Coach Monty Williams, he's been a head coach in the NBA. He's been an assistant in the NBA. This may be a step down for him to have some sort of role with the Notre Dame men's basketball team. But at this time, you got $65 million in your pocket. Take a break from the NBA. Maybe that'll come back in some later years, because I think Monty, he's only 53, 54 years old. So still a pretty young guy. Coach Shrewsbury, he's a year younger than me, so he's 47. So I think, too, just to have an older guy on staff would really help. But I think not so much an assistant coach on the Notre Dame men's team, but some sort of advisor or liaison. I can never get that word right. But some sort of consultant. That's the word I'm getting at, because despite all the great things I see Coach Shrewsbury doing with his program right now, he's building that foundation. He's really looking to recruiting to set that foundation. He only looks to the portal when he needs a couple more players. And he, as you can see from this year, the portal players he signed out of the transfer portal are guys that are just role players. They're not superstars or anything like that, just to fill in some gaps here and there. He wants to build that foundation first to reset this program because it was a mess when he took it over. I get that, but at some point, despite some solid recruiting classes so far, I think they were ranked in the top 20 this year. I think for 2025, it's in the top 20 as well, or even the top 15 maybe. However, he's going to have to start making some swings to get some 5-star recruits, even if they're one and done kids that, hey, they're going to go to college 1 year and then head to the NBA. And a lot of those 5-star, like Duke right now, Duke's going to have 4 to 5 5-star recruits coming in for 2024, 2025 season. However, I'm not saying get all those type of players, like 5 recruits like that, because I don't think you can win a championship that way, which is 5 stud freshmen. You may get to the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, even the Final 4. But those kids, they're not used to the wear and tear of the college game. And I think they just run out of gas. And they still can't build that chemistry just after 1 year. I think if Coach Shrewsbury gets this solid foundation, gets a kind of what Coach Bray would do, have an older team as well, but you still have to have those 5-star kids, just those diaper dandies, as Dick Vitale used to say. Thad Matta did this perfectly his early days at Ohio State, and even a little bit in his latter days. For every one and done like Craig or Greg Oden, Mike Conley, who else are they? Costa Koufis, who was D'Angelo Russell. There's a Jamar Butler, a 4-year player, a John Diebler, a 4-year player, even Evan Turner, who was a 3-year player. He mixed the 5-star with those 3 to 4 stars that would have to stay 4 to, if not 5 years and be redshirted. That really nice mix. And I think Coach Shrewsbury will get to that moment, but I think with Monty Williams, he would be, whether it's a recruiter, consultant, when these kids come in, and he could say, hey, you may only be a 3 to 4 star kid right now, but after 4, if not 5 years here, I can get you to the point where you're going to be a solid, whether a 1st round or a 2nd round NBA pick, or even a free agent in the NBA. I can show you the ropes of the NBA. Conversely, for those one and done kids, if we can get a couple of those at some point, he can say, hey, I know you're only going to be here at Notre Dame for 1 year. I can get you ready though. Put all your heart and soul in this 1 year at Notre Dame, and I can get you ready in just 1 year for the NBA. So it's an easier transition to the NBA. And I'm sure parents would like to hear that too, because some of these kids, they're that good. They do not need to be in college. Now, you look at J.J. Starling. He was considered to be a one and done. He came to Notre Dame in Mike Bray's last season, had an okay season. He left after the fiasco with the Mike Bray era. He went to Syracuse, had an okay year, finding out he's truly not a one and done kid. And some of these kids think they are after just one season, and they're not. But others, they truly are. Let's say if a Kobe Bryant or a LeBron James played 1 year in college, had they done that instead of coming right out of high school? Yes, those type of players. And if we can get those players, I think it's a great opportunity for Monty Williams to be part of that system for Coach Shrewsbury. Whether that happens, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I think, hey, Coach Shrew, I'd be calling Monty Williams right now to say, hey, I know you probably want to get back in the NBA, or maybe just do something else with his life. But for the next maybe 2, 3, 4 years, can you help me, be a consultant to get this machine fine-tuned for this program, set that foundation, but then also get these possibly one and done kids, or the kids that may end up being 3, 4 star kids that eventually become NBA ready, but it takes them a little bit longer. So just throwing it out there. Again, I know Monty Williams, I'm sure he did. Whenever you get fired, you don't feel the greatest, but for $65 million, I think he's going to take that okay. And it was pretty much major news this week. And I just don't think people realize that he played at Notre Dame and was a big part of Notre Dame men's basketball at one time. So thank you so much for joining me for episode 137. And as always, go Irish.